What is modern? The dictionary says, of the present time or recent times, and new and intended to be different from traditional styles. However, in the context of world history, the interpretation of modern is relative, varying wildly according to culture and time period, as does its visual expression, modern art. Then, would the interpretation of modern in contemporary Korea differ from that of pre-modern Korea? And how did modern Korean art reflect its distinctive Korean context? It was in the 19th century, under threat from foreign powers, that the modern Korean national identity was formed. This new Korean identity was challenged and reshaped under Japanese colonial rule from 1910 to 1945, and further intensified in recovery efforts after the Korean War. This newfound modernity brought new forms of artistic expressions along with it. While adopting modernist style and sensibility, modern Korean artists often utilized distinctively Korean motifs and colors. Many Western-style painters who had experimented with new painting materials and techniques created self-portraits and nude paintings to convey their self-identities and ethnic consciousness. Jung-Seob, one of the most famous and ingenious modern Korean artists, lived through the Japanese colonial period and the devastating Korean War. Lee is known for expressionistic paintings, experimental tinfoil drawings, and playful surrealist illustrations filled with animistic symbolism. But above all, he is known as the Korean bull painter because of his idiosyncratic bull paintings. Like Picasso, whose bulls and bullfights are so iconic to modern Spanish art, Lee Jung-Seob's bulls represent this dynamic modern era of Korean art. But what is so modern about Lee's bull paintings, and why do Koreans love them so much? Humanity has long held bulls in powerful fascination. Their hauntingly beautiful images decorate the ancient caves of Lascaux. They were hunted and then domesticated, not only for food, but for ritual sacrifices. In major civilizations around the world, they were worshipped as sacred, powerful idols. Following the tradition of hunting and herding rituals, bullfights and bull riding developed as a form of spectacle for audiences in many cultures in Europe and the Americas, and are still a feature in many popular folk festivals. In Korea, the bull, or so in Korean, was a source of essential labor in farming. They were also lifelong companions to the farmers, with whom they worked side by side. During festivals in the early summer, bullfights entertained the villagers. The bull, a fixture of the rural community, also became a symbol of the Joseon spirit during the Japanese colonial period. In Korea, the tradition of visual representation of bulls is long and rich. In ancient Korea, stone chamber tombs were decorated with murals depicting the ox. They are shown in a stable, as a cart-pulling animal, and as the god of agriculture. In genre paintings depicting the daily lives of commoners, bulls plow the fields and transport the villagers. They also held a key position in Korean spiritual life. 10 Ox Herding Pictures is a series of short poems and accompanying drawings used in the Zen Buddhist tradition to describe the stages of practice that lead to enlightenment. In them, a figure searches for a lost ox, going on to find, catch, tame, and ride the animal back home. In doing so, the man frees himself of ego, realizing his fundamental identity as one with the ultimate, undivided reality. The ox symbolizes the Buddha nature, and the ox herd the self. Some parts of the series, like catching, taming, and riding a bull, became common themes in Buddhist color paintings. Literati painters in pre-modern Korea not only created poetic ox paintings in the spare Chinese ink painting tradition, but also observed Korean bulls and painted them realistically. Lee Jung-Seob inherited and drew from all of these long, rich traditions, while imbuing his own bull paintings with personal meaning and reinventing them in his own modern style. Born into an affluent family near Pyongyang, Lee Jung-Seob's artistic talent and interests were supported and motivated by the culturally rich and quickly modernizing local environments of Pyongyang. During the Japanese colonial period, a large-scale excavation of ancient royal tombs was underway in Pyongyang, giving young Lee the chance to see them in person at the Pyongyang Prefecture Museum. In the tombs were murals depicting guardian animals, such as a blue dragon, white tiger, phoenix, black warriors, flying celestial deities, cloud and mountain motifs, and interlocking floral and grass designs, all imagery based in Taoism. The grand scale and energetic style of zoomorphic and mythological images in the murals would make a lifelong impact on the then young Jung-Seob. In 1930, he entered Osan High School. There, Yi received a first-rate education from pioneering artists who had themselves received modern art education in the US and Europe. He learned the basics of Western-style painting as well as experimental techniques. He continued his studies at a liberal art institute, Bunko-Gakuen, in Tokyo. There, Yi developed his own painting style of mystic asceticism in modern sensitivity. He was strongly inspired by the expressionistic style of Picasso and Georges Rouault, and was called Bunka's Rouault, due to his excessive use of black color and bold lines. It was during this time that Yi made the bull a main subject of his paintings. Yi identified himself with the bull, and he was not alone. A group of Korean art students in Tokyo, pursuing their own form of Korean modernism, formed the White Bull Society in 1937. White bulls had become a folk symbol of Korean identity and resistance to Japanese colonial authority, as Koreans were often characterized by their white hanbok garments. Back in Korea, Yi had had many chances to closely observe and draw bulls. Yi combined these observations with his studies of modern expressionism and anatomical representation. His paintings in the early 1940s were typified by excessive use of black pigment, with bold, thick strokes and soft outlines. Compared with these intense representations of vigorous wild bulls, his numerous postcard illustrations to his Japanese colleague and lover, Yamamoto Masako, are playful and full of primitive animism, evoking the simple forms of both KArt and romantic surrealism. The animals, plants, flowers, and naked bodies in primitive landscape settings are rendered in bright colors and cheerful lines, conveying symbolic meanings of rebirth, eternity, love, prosperity, life, and fertility. Some of these postcards were incorporated into oil paintings. Yi produced mythological paintings of animals, including bulls, and female nude figures under a full moon, in surrealist ambiance. In contrast to the worsening wartime reality, his paintings portray a surreal world, full of sensuality and vitality. In his small drawings, we can see the process of the artist taming the bull, playing with the bull, and becoming one. Here, Yi depicted his naked fiancée Masako, intermingled with the bull as a couple. Eventually, the couple married in Korea in 1945, near the end of the Pacific War and Japanese occupation. When the Korean War broke out in 1950, Yi, his wife, and 2 sons fled to the southernmost island of Jeju. Though their refugee life on Jeju Island was largely miserable, this experience gave Yi new subject matter for his art. During this time, he created warm and peaceful drawings where children played with birds, fish, and crabs, and picked fruit in a surreal landscape. The paintings recall both the Goguryeo tomb murals and also the postcards he had sent to his wife in their early years. The nudity and idyllic landscape is evocative of Christian depictions of paradise, while the theme of children playing amongst plants and picking fruit is often found on traditional Korean ceramics and paintings, depicting the peach blossom land, which symbolizes the Taoist utopia. Before long, amidst the poverty and ruin of war, Yi was forced to send his wife and sons to Japan. Although devastated by the separation from his family, Yi remained prolific. He began to experiment with new materials and techniques. Although art materials were often scarce during the war, Yi was undeterred. Yi used various media such as ink, pen, pencil, charcoal, crayon, watercolor, gouache, and enamel on paper, strawboard, veneer board, and oiled floor paper. One surrealist technique that Yi experimented with and developed in his later years was grattage, a French term meaning scraping. Yi often used a paint knife or a brush stick instead of a soft brush to make strong lines in his oil paintings, as if he were drawing on a hard stone surface. He also used inner foil wrappers from American cigarette packets to create idiosyncratic, humorous drawings. After incising lines with a nail on the foil, Yi applied oil paint or cigarette ash and rubbed off the surface, filling the incised lines with dark colors. The method recalls the inlay technique used on Goryeo ceramics and metalware. In these very complex, intermingled, and compact compositions, a bull is often depicted together with his family in the line drawings. The small scale of these foil drawings belie Yi's lifelong ambitions, which had always been large-scale wall painting, just like Picasso's Guernica. In Guernica, Picasso depicted the violence and horror of the Spanish Civil War by adopting metaphorical imagery from bullfighting and mingling them with screaming figures and wounded, dismembered bodies, all in cubist and surrealist compositions. Yi evokes a similar style in his tinfoil drawings during the Korean Civil War, but unlike the grim horror Picasso depicts, Yi's drawings are full of affection and humor. The humorously stumbling bull appears in other pen drawings and oil paintings. Alone in a war-torn city, Yi was isolated and increasingly destitute, but his drawings conceal the loneliness and despair he experienced in day-to-day life. For a time, Yi lived in Dongyong, a picturesque port city in the south. It was here that he would revisit his favorite subjects from the past, while treating them in a more mature, expressionistic, and monumental manner. His works from this period include many of his surviving masterpieces. In this painting, the bull throws up its head, crying out with an open mouth and sad eyes. Yi depicted yellow bulls, black bulls, and native striped oxen. These bull paintings were, in fact, his self-portraits. As he once said, "A bull is me, and I am a bull." His full-length bull paintings are extensions of the head portraits of the bulls. They are not images of a bull working in a field, but rather a posed image of a single fighting bull. His bull series also epitomize his avant-gardism, displayed through vigorous movement and deformation, as well as in the expressionistic energy in the brushwork. Yi's use of industrial paint mixed into oil pigment enabled him to achieve expressive, flowing lines. This was more possible on paper, which Yi often used, along with veneer hardboard, rather than canvas. The monumentality and gravity of the dark and heavy colors, and Yi's dramatic, intentional lines, again evoke the Goguryeo tomb murals of his youth. Yi did not use many colors, instead preferring a limited palette. He was an expressionist in his use of dynamic lines and forms, not through his coloration. These paintings also conveyed political meanings of protest, first against Japanese imperial militarism, and later against the aftermath of the Korean War. Remember, the bull, that common fixture of the Korean countryside, was a symbol of the Korean people. By choosing the white bull as subject, Yi spoke to the indomitable spirit of the Korean people. And as a symbol of self, these paintings of furious, bellowing bulls reflected the frenzied energy of the artist himself, struggling to survive the turmoil of war, to break through extreme poverty, and to reunite with his family. This illustration in a letter to his son from 1954 and a completed oil painting of the same scene revisits familiar mystical motifs. The naked son is holding a peach blossom, the other a white bird, while Yi's wife holds the boys in the flying pose of a celestial being. The image recalls the family's flight to the south during the Korean War, but at the same time alludes to Yi's hope of leading his family to paradise, to a better life in a peaceful country. Interestingly, the bull pulling the cart strikes the same pose as the animal in White Bull. Like the white bull, is it furious and ready to fight, or is it a happy, complacent bull? Even as he pretended, through his many letters and paintings to his family, to be the hopeful, happy father, in reality, Yi's life was filled with pain and difficulty. His physical and mental health quickly deteriorating, Yi was frequently hospitalized. He pressed on with his bull series. This bull, alone, struggles to move forward while bleeding from his forehead. Even in the darkest moments of his life, Yi never completely lost hope, and he never stopped struggling. In this self-portrait, created in his wearisome waning years, his expression is composed and content. Unable to fulfill his wish of seeing his family one last time, Yi died alone in Seoul in 1956. Yi was considered a genius in the art community during his lifetime, but it was only decades after his death that he would achieve widespread recognition. In 1972, Seoul's Gallery Hyundai held a solo exhibition of the artist's work, reintroducing him to the public. Since then, his reputation has only grown. He continues to fascinate Korean audiences who empathize with his tragic life and find reflections of themselves and their own struggles in his bull paintings. Jung-Seob managed to create a very distinct form of modern art, one based in tradition, yet expressed through innovative experimental technique. His bull paintings are simultaneously definitively Korean, global, and immensely personal. In his time, Yi's experimentation with material and style were too new and idiosyncratic to be labeled modern. However, it is exactly this pioneering and personal vision, synthesized with tradition, along with the singular, tumultuous times in which he lived, that now make him one of Korea's defining modern artists.